Powell River residents say reconciliation is being used to bypass local democracy.
Prime Minister Mark Carney was accused of siding with Hamas over Israel.
The Trans Mountain expansion has pumped $12.6 billion into Canada's oil industry. Hello Canada, it's Monday, August 11th, and this is the True North Daily Brief. I'm Isaac Lamoureux.
And I'm Wooly Tamtam.
We've got you covered with all the news you need to know. Let's discuss the top stories of the day and the True North exclusives you won't hear anywhere else. Some concerned residents of Powell River, British Columbia are worried about a proposed name change, claiming the municipal process has not abided by Canadians' basic democratic rights and freedoms under the guise of reconciliation. The Tla'amin Nation, whose traditional territory includes parts of the Sunshine Coast, is urging the city of about 15,000 to drop the name Powell River in the name of reconciliation. Longtime resident Pat Martin, writing for the New Westminster Times, raised the issue of how delegations and municipal affairs were handled surrounding the controversial decision to change the town's name. Martin and others say the process is being shaped by unilateral decision-making, a lack of meaningful consultation, and encroachment on basic liberties, including freedom of speech and mobility rights. The town of Powell River takes its name from the nearby body of water, named after Israel Wood Powell, BC's first superintendent for Indian Affairs. Those advocating for the town's name to be changed cite his role in the establishment of residential schools in the province. Some institutions even appear to have preemptively adopted the name change well ahead of a non-binding opinion poll scheduled for 2026. Powell River's Visitor Information Center, for example, has already rebranded itself as the Quathet Visitor Center. Quathet, a Tla'amin word, means working together and now replaces Powell River entirely. Upon arriving at the visitor center, a newly installed Tla'amin poster instructs visitors to identify your intentions and willingness to abide by Tla'amin protocol. Staff have admitted they cannot explain what those protocols entail. So, Waleed, are there any recent cases where democratic process and the local concerns of private property owners are being overlooked in the name of reconciliation with First Nations?
Well, absolutely. Powell River is not an isolated case. We've seen similar tensions play out all over British Columbia and across Canada, but especially in BC, where reconciliation policies are implemented in ways that appear to bypass democratic process and sideline local voices. One example came this spring, actually, at Joffre Lakes Provincial Park, where BC Parks actually closed the park to non-Indigenous campers for an extended period to, quote, recognize the importance of the area to local First Nations. The closure was abrupt, there was no meaningful public consultation, and effectively restricted public access to Crown land based on heritage, on race. That sparked a wave of criticism from hikers, small business owners in the tourism sector, legal experts, and local residents. We've also seen cases where municipal land acknowledgements or Indigenous territorial claims get inserted to official documents like annual reports or public signs, street signs, without verification. And when residents or councillors raise concerns, they're brushed off as nitpicking. In some municipalities, new bylaws are being passed that limit what citizens can say at council meetings, particularly if they challenge reconciliation narratives, like the unmarked grave stories, which to many is a chilling effect on free speech. So, while the stated goal of reconciliation and the process in these cases has sidelined open debate, I ignored the principle that decisions affecting the whole community should involve the actual whole community. That's what makes Powell River part of a much bigger trend we're starting to see. Reconciliation, or at least reconciliation politics over democracy. Prime Minister Mark Carney has drawn criticism for his recent comments regarding the conflict in Gaza, appearing to side with Hamas, a group designated as a terrorist organization, rather than with Israel, a long-standing Canadian ally. During a press conference on Friday, Carney was questioned about Israel's actions in, quote, taking over Gaza City, despite the factual inaccuracy within the question itself. Carney stated this is wrong. Carney said, quote, this action is not going to contribute to an improvement in the humanitarian situation on the ground. It is going to put the lives of the hostages at greater risk. We reiterate our call for an immediate ceasefire. We reiterate our call for Hamas to immediately return all the hostages and their remains. We reiterate that Hamas has no role going forward and will continue to work with our allies to contribute what we can to achieving those outcomes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu weighed in saying, quote, we are going to free Gaza from Hamas, he said. Gaza will be demilitarized and a peaceful civilian administration will be established, one that is not the Palestinian Authority, not Hamas, and not any other terrorist organization. This will help free our hostages and ensure Gaza does not pose a threat to Israel in the future. Former independent MP Kevin Vaughn weighed in on the quote genocide happening in Gaza. He showed that previous genocides which occurred during the Holocaust, Rwandan genocide, Armenian genocide, and Cambodian genocide all saw population decreases of 63%, 81%, 78%, and 25% respectively. Conversely, the population in Palestine has increased by 450% between 1949 and 2023. So question for you, Isaac. How effectively has the Liberal government handled the Israel-Gaza conflict?
Yeah, Waleed. Well, if you were hoping that the Liberals sided with Canada's ally of over 7 decades, Israel, then of course quite poorly. This is because Canada has repeatedly sided with the terrorists of Hamas in Gaza instead of Israel. For example, tensions escalated after Canada joined the United Kingdom and France in issuing a joint statement in May condemning Israel's military operations in Gaza and warning of potential targeted sanctions if those operations continued. And Hamas publicly welcomed the statement, calling it a significant step in the right direction, marking the second time the group had thanked Canada. Critics such as the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs and opposition politicians like Pierre Poilievre argued that such endorsements risk legitimizing Hamas and weakening Israel's efforts to dismantle the group's capabilities. Carney has also pledged to support recognition of a Palestinian state, firstly at the UN General Assembly. He has tied this position to a vision of a two-state solution and called for reforms within the Palestinian Authority, including excluding Hamas from governance, ending payments to convicted terrorists' families, and committing to demilitarization. Jewish groups such as the CIJA and B'nai B'rith Canada have warned that granting recognition before these conditions are met is dangerously premature and could embolden Hamas while undermining peace efforts. The Prime Minister has maintained that Canada supports Israel's right to self-defense, but has framed his calls for a ceasefire and humanitarian aid access as essential to addressing the situation in Gaza. His government says more than $300 million in humanitarian aid has been allocated, but is facing delivery challenges. In fact, I just 2 days ago when I was writing this article, I looked at the UN's data on how much food was getting through, and I think around 88% of food deliveries had been intercepted either by Hamas or other organizations. So opposition leader Pierre Poilievre and other critics have used Hamas's public expressions of gratitude as evidence that the government's stance is being exploited by a terrorist organization. The Israeli government has also pushed back, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejecting foreign calls to halt operations until Hamas is dismantled and hostages are released. And remember, on October 7th, 2023, Hamas carried out its deadliest ever assault on Israel, killing more than 1,200 people, wounding thousands, and taking 240 civilians hostage, many of whom remain in captivity. The group, which governs Gaza, has a long record of breaking ceasefires, diverting humanitarian aid, and carrying out attacks on civilians. And one more thing I'll just mention quickly is, Carney, remember on July 31st, which was the day before Trump's tariff deadline, came out with a statement saying he would recognize the Palestinian state, which U.S. President Donald Trump absolutely despised, and he publicly stated that would harm trade negotiations. So in a way, Carney sided with Palestine and Hamas instead of Canada, because as you well know, we got the 5th worst tariff rate in the world. The Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion has reportedly boosted Canada's oil industry, generating an estimated $12.6 billion in new revenues and providing a fiscal uplift for governments, according to analysts. The expanded pipeline, operational in May 2024 after years of delays and cost overruns, has improved market access for Canadian crude, raising prices and increasing export volumes, an Alberta Central report states. Alberta Central is a financial service provider for credit unions in the province. The $34 billion pipeline expansion connects Strathcona County, Alberta, to Burnaby, British Columbia, spanning 1,150 kilometers. It boosted capacity from 300,000 to 890,000 barrels per day. The federal government bought the pipeline for $4.5 billion in August 2018 under then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, a deal that included both the existing TMX and the expansion project. Construction began in 2019 after overcoming regulatory and legal challenges, and it was completed in May 2024, 6 years behind schedule, becoming the first new pipeline to the West Coast in 70 years. Alberta Alberta Central's findings indicate expanded access to United States refineries and overseas markets, including China, which has reduced the discount on Canadian heavy oil. The report estimates Alberta alone could see $5.4 billion in additional tax and royalty revenues, representing nearly 7% of provincial revenues in the 2024-25 fiscal year. So, Waleed, everyone in the political sphere seems to talk a lot about pipelines, but has there been any actual progress lately on the development of another pipeline?
Look, to be fair, there is some sort of rhetorical progress, but it's all talk for now. Nothing is under construction just yet. In Alberta, Premier Danielle Smith has led the way in confirming that her province is working on a plan for a new crude oil pipeline from Alberta to the port of Prince Rupert in British Columbia. I think that was back in June. She's speaking with major pipeline companies to either form a partnership or choose one company to lead the project. The idea is for the pipeline to carry about 1 million barrels of oil per day and to give Canada more options for selling oil overseas instead of relying so heavily on our next door customer, the United States. Smith has said the project would also be linked to a major carbon capture project, and she believes federal rules will need to be changed so approvals can happen faster. In Ontario, the provincial government has just started the process of studying the idea of an energy corridor running from Western Canada to the east, otherwise known as the East-West Corridor. This can include new pipelines to bring oil and natural gas from Alberta to refineries in southern Ontario, and possibly to a new deep sea port on James Bay. The goal is to prove Canada's energy security, create jobs across the country, and reduce dependence on foreign infrastructure, while also including Indigenous consultations and participations in the projects. So, no new projects for now have broken the ground yet, but both Alberta and Ontario are actively taking steps that could lead to major projects if they receive the political support from the government backing off and financial support from the private sector as well.
That's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. You can stay on top of new episodes every weekday by subscribing to the Daily Brief on iTunes and Spotify. Also, while you're at it, make sure to hit us with a 5-star rating and please leave a review.